the US. And as you can guess from my accent, I'm not from the US, I'm French. I did my PhD at INRIA Paris in France. And my topic is formal verification using separation logic.
I'm Mike Dodds. I work at Galois. I wore the T-shirt today so that you all can remember who I am. We're a research consultancy. We're about 110 people, employee-owned, so it's a fun place to work. So my history is I was assistant professor in the UK before I moved to America in about 2017, and then before that I was at University of Cambridge and the University of York doing various separation logic and concurrency related things. And I think I was just thinking, I think the first POPL I went to was probably Austin in 2010, I think. That was, so yeah, I've been knocking around for a few years at this point. So I think mid-career maybe is the summary.
Hello, I'm Jenna DiVincenzo. I'm a new professor at Purdue, so in the US. I just graduated in 2023 with my PhD, so I went right through to the assistant professor position, which is possible in our field, which is good. So I did my PhD at CMU under Jonathan Aldrich and Joshua Sunshine, if you know those people. And I do research in gradual verification, so more formal verification, but I try to mix static and dynamic together, and I have dabbled a little bit in separation logic myself as well. So that's becoming a theme.
Cool. Hey all, I'm Ron Garcia. I'm an associate professor of computer science at University of British Columbia. I started there in 2011. Before that, I was a postdoc at CMU. I was working with Frank Fenning, but I also worked with Jonathan Aldrich. It's like, why did you work with Jonathan Aldrich? Well, I work on gradual typing primarily, and so there was just at the time, Jonathan was getting interested in it, and then one of my longtime collaborators, Eric Tonter, was visiting him at the time, and that's when I met Eric, and now he's one of my best friends. And then before that, I was a postdoc at Rice University, working with Walid Taha, and I did my PhD at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, which was kind of, at the time, it was like one of the scheme places. So little types, lots of dynamics. Call CC is the best ever. A small tidbit, just it's really fun being up here because I was one of the co-organizers of the first PLMW with Stephanie Weirich and Kathleen Fisher, which was awesome. And when we did that, we didn't know that there would ever be another one. It was just kind of a one-off. And this is just, if all of my research goes to dust, just knowing that this has been going on will have made my career worth it as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome. So the way this works is that we'll open the floor to questions in just a minute, but usually just to get things started, I ask a question. And for every question, unless the audience directs it to some of you in particular, you can feel free to answer or take the mic and answer it. So the question that I'll seed this with is, how is research after graduating for a PhD for you different than what it was during your PhD, if it is at all? Like the process of doing research or the topics you choose or anything you want to add along those lines?
Cool. Yeah, well, I have the mic, so I'll start. So my experience as a graduate student, and I was a graduate student for a very long time. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. I started in electrical engineering, realized hardware sucks, switched to computer architecture, realized hardware sucks, switched to software engineering, software sucks, and then eventually I found programming languages, and I was like, this is cool. But a lot of it was about, early on, learning how to do school. You spend 20 years learning how to get reasonable grades while having some fun. And then for me, learning how to do, even think about research as a concept was really difficult. I mean, it was a real struggle that it was this, how do you find a problem that's worth doing? How do you know it's good? Do you trust your advisor when they say, yeah, this is a good one? And you're like, is it really though? And you're like, yeah, it is. And then and then also, in addition, finding, there's another PL researcher, Philippa Gardner, who talks about the idea of finding your research voice, which is your style and your aesthetics and all of that. And that takes a real long time to develop. I mean, it took me well past being a graduate student. And some of it is about learning, how to keep learning about things, but also not straying too far and being able to do things and keep making forward progress. And then some of it is about learning how do you build a relationship with a student around a thing that they might be interested in but not sure, and then finding the right angle at which to take it. And most of my work, as I say, is in programming languages, semantics. I've had a few students that have co-supervised where it's one of these like, why am I even here? And then at the end of the day, you realize that there was something valuable that you contributed to the growth of a student who was going through the same thing that you did before. So I think some of it is there's always more to learn about how do I pick research problems, and it's always something that you can revisit. But I think really the way my advisor described it was doing your PhD is about the development of you, and it's your driver's license for doing research. Like you managed to go through that process and that struggle, and you had a success, and then you try and build on it.
Yeah, I think Ron said a lot of really great things that I definitely agree with. I guess I'll kind of switch gears a little bit. I would say in terms of like day-to-day life, because I think Ron echoes a lot of the things that I would agree with, so I'll take a little bit of a different side of things. So day-to-day PhD life, I feel like I had a lot of time to really get into the weeds of the research, really dig in, think about things, solve the hard problems of the research that I was doing. You just don't have that time, unfortunately, as a faculty. The job is different when you look at research. I'm a project manager more than I am the person doing it. I'm supposed to be guiding students through the research now. And I'm trying to find that balance because a lot of my students are new, so I also have to still dig into the weeds, but I have to also know when to stop and let them kind of go and do it and then come back to me and then give them guidance if they get stuck, but kind of instead of me being in control of everything, kind of letting them have more control and me kind of stepping back and focusing more on the big picture, which I actually kind of find is fun. So I'm kind of excited to not be stuck in the weeds all the time and let my students figure that out, and then I get to kind of look at the broader vision, exploring new areas that relate to the core of what I do in graduate verification, which was my thesis. So I am expanding on my thesis in my work now, but I get to learn about large language models, and I never thought I would, as a PL person, learn about large language models, but turns out they're kind of useful when you pair them with PL things. So, which I think someone's giving a talk on that tomorrow, Loris, maybe? So if you guys are interested, or a keynote, so that's good. Plug, I guess, me advertising for that accidentally on the panel. But yeah, so I guess what I like about the research I do now as a faculty versus PhD is I really get to kind of explore different areas that I didn't think that I could or would have time to as a PhD student and focus more on the big picture.
Everyone's taking all the things I was going to say. I think to echo what you were saying, the sort of anti-pattern is that you sort of stop doing research and you start answering emails all day, right? This is kind of sometimes what getting more senior means. I think that a thing that I've learned to do more is you get kind of more of a sense of like the overall landscape of research and also more of a gut sense of what's going to work and what isn't. And so what is very satisfying is when, and I'm by no means the expert at this, but I see other people do this as well, is when someone comes to you with a problem and you say, oh, how about you try this thing? And then they're like, oh my God, and it's just that I've seen like a bazillion papers at this point. And, like my old, boss, Matthew Parkinson, was the best at sort of, you gave him your problem, and then he would say, oh, I think what you mean is this thing. And you think, damn you, that's much smarter than the thing I was thinking. You say, of course, that was what I was thinking. Thank you, Matt. You kind of go and work on it. So I find that kind of as you get more into a research career and post-PhD, you get more of that sort of big picture view, and you just get more of a gut sense of what's going to work. So that's very gratifying. And it does also, it's necessary, because often you're sliced quite thin and you're decontextualized, and all you can give is like an hour or 2 hours. But yeah, when you can give that calibration, that's very satisfying.
And so I agree, of course. And I think what I want to say is a message of hope. Like at the beginning of my PhD, I found everything very difficult to do. I did my PhD on separation logic, so I had to learn separation logic. I did on space complexity, so I had to learn space complexity. But by the end, I knew this topic, and now I can work on them, and everything feels much more easier. So don't be afraid. It gets a lot easier.
Awesome, thank you for that. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Could you guys go over perhaps your experiences or any tips you have for choosing, for your PhD, choosing your advisor and which school and the topic?
I have opinions, but you go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's very difficult from the outside world to decide whether you want to do a PhD with someone. So I would advise to, if possible, have an internship with people you want to try. So you can try what it's working with them, and then decide if you want to pursue in this topic and with this person.
Yeah, I would strongly advise. I think the advisor relationship is more important than the topic, to be honest. Like, it's sort of like, it's not quite getting married, but you're certainly going to spend a lot of time with this person. And so I would say, if you vibe together, probably you will not end up working on the topic you think you're going to work on. That's just kind of, most people don't work on exactly that. But if you're working with an advisor and you have an amazing relationship, then that can be a lifelong, that can be a career-long thing that kind of provides value to you. So, I don't know, I would just do a bit of have a call with them. The other thing is talk to their current students. And sometimes their current students will say to you, this person is a horrible nightmare. Do not come and work to this lab. I have heard that story about people saying, do not come here. It's awful. So I would say, do your research and talk to people that are currently working with them, and don't worry too much about the exact topic, the exact dialed in topic, but worry about that relationship that you're going to have with them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Definitely talking to them, talking to their students is one advice that I like to give to a lot of students who are so I have some students that I mentor, and they always come to me and ask me, I'm deciding between these advisors, what do I do? A lot of times talking to them, asking, and then in their interview, I'm assuming when you're asking that, you're getting to the stage of interviews and trying to decide for an advisor, right? One thing to consider is and they want you to ask questions. So ask about their mentoring style. Make sure that it fits. It's kind of like building that relationship that you think that works. The way that you might not know exactly how you work in research right now, but you might have some idea of how you like to work, at least from your undergrad in some capacity, and you can kind of ask those questions. And they want you to ask those questions to them and then to the students, because the students are always going to be more honest than the actual advisor themselves, because the advisor at that point probably trying to convince you. And then I guess I'll just touch on, because it is a little bit unique to everyone's different situation. I do think you should look for interest, but I guess I'll talk about how I decided. So I was really kind of deciding on a number of great locations and places and people to work with. They had some overlapping interests, and I really like software engineering, and then I kind of fell into PL as I kind of went. So I had a lot of awesome people I was thinking of working with, and somehow all the software engineering people kind of also already overlapped with PL, so yeah, funny story about that. But I think what narrowed it down to me between UW and CMU, location actually played a part in it. My family was very close to CMU, and I didn't realize this until, my decision came to be, there were other people at CMU that I could work with. If I didn't like what my advisor was doing, I could switch advisors. So that really played a part in it, ultimately. But then I realized later, location actually mattered, because I really needed that support network, especially during COVID, during my PhD. I really found out later, PhD is hard, it's long. Lots of things in your life or out externally can happen during 6 years of a PhD. It's really nice to have a support network nearby. And that could be friends too. It can be friends in the program, so you can also make friends in the program. So I guess you can talk to students as well and see if they're getting along and have events to go to and stuff like that. Because really, for me, I didn't realize it until later, a support network really helped me through my PhD. That includes advisor, but also location actually did play a big part in my decision. So I know some people say, don't worry about location, you should go with your research interests and advisor, but sometimes having a location that gives you a good support network is also a good way to kind of choose advisors.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief, because I guess a lot of stuff was covered. My personal my personal story was wild. I made all the wrong decisions for all the wrong reasons, and things worked out swimmingly in the long run. So I can't. I would like whatever I did. I don't recommend it, but it worked out. But I do say that I think to echo what was said was that the supervisory relationship can be really significant. And there can be different styles. Like I have some friends who are professors, and their style is, I don't talk to my students about feelings. It's just not what I do. And I think it's useful when thinking about the supervisory role to think that there's never going to be a guru. There's not going to be the one professor who meets all of your personal needs. I mean, the way I describe it, I was raised by a group of professors that were all at the place where I was. So like my supervisor was just always had my back, and never kicked me out of the program for some reason, and that worked out. And then I had like people who took me aside and gave me advice when they felt that I needed it, and there were other professors who just were the right person to talk to about the right thing. And then the other big thing was having a group of siblings, basically, other students who were around who made both social life good and were also able to relate. So don't look for the one person who has everything that you need, but it is important to look out for the person who turns out to be not a good fit for you. And so that's where I think it is worth talking to students and talking to other faculty in the area to kind of, people won't necessarily say it directly, but if you hear something a little weird, then it's worth inspecting further.
For those of you who went on to become faculty, how did you decide you wanted to do that? And is there anything that you did differently during your PhD in order to prepare for that?
So the latter one's easy, as I had, it just didn't really occur to me that I'd become a professor when I was a grad student. It's like, why did you become why did you go to grad school? It's like, because I wanted my band to stay together. But I also felt like I finished school and I felt like I knew nothing. I was like, I have a degree and I don't know anything. So as far as why I decided to become faculty, I think the easy way to describe it was I had this moment where I did a research project and I had a big win for me. Like there's this, and it felt good. Like it felt like, wow, I created something that's just beyond the edge of what other people know, and that was really exciting. And that was after years of being really unhappy with the work that I was doing, even though my supervisor kept telling me that I was doing good stuff. And there's this really great quote by Ira Glass, who's This American Life, and he talks about people who do creative stuff. The reason that you get into being creative is because your taste is good, but your abilities don't match your taste, and so you're angry at yourself all the time because you keep making stuff and it sucks. And then what he says is basically you just have to keep making stuff that sucks, and then eventually you'll get there. And it really just takes long for some people. So I got that bug, and then I did a couple of postdocs. And when I got the opportunity to be faculty, I was at a point where I was like, well, do I do faculty or do I try to just go into industry? And there's lots of constraints. And for me, the thought was, well, if you go into industry, it's actually quite harder to go and be a researcher. It's typically easier if you're faculty to go into industry at some point. And so I thought, I'll try that one first and see what I think. So I tried it, and I'm still trying it. That's basically what happened.
A little different. I mean, I guess it makes sense why I didn't postdoc and I really tried hard to get a faculty position. I went into a PhD because I wanted to be a faculty. I learned a lot about what it actually means to be a faculty along the way of my PhD, but I really so I had some really fantastic professors in my undergrad, but I also had some really bad professors in my undergrad in terms of teaching. And so in some of my classes, I kind of sat there and I can do better than this. I know that's not bad, not nice to say, but I was like, I think I could teach better than this. Once I understood the content. So I'm like, and I was like, I did tutor in my undergrad too, so I think that helped. I really wanted to distribute knowledge to others, and then I was like, I could do it better than some of the professors that I had in my class. So then I was like, well, I did love doing research, and so when I was like, okay, well, I like research, and I really want to be a professor, I need to get a PhD, so hence towards going towards PhD. And so because I went in knowing I wanted to be a professor, there were a lot of things that my advisors in the program helped me do to kind of like help my case. Much of which was we had a great RU program, so I mentored undergrads in research pretty much all through my PhD, which was really awesome. And it was awesome because I also had my advisors to help me learn how to be a better mentor and also like pick up where I might be failing. And then through the process, I think that hopefully I've become a pretty good mentor, and I was able to step into that role, I thought, pretty easily. Also was able to TA and help like really get involved in TAing and course construction. Two of the most important jobs of a faculty is teaching and mentoring, and research, of course. But mentoring is a huge part of being successful in research as a faculty. So those were two things I thought, like, going in with that knowledge of being a professor, I really got to spend a lot more time putting effort into those things alongside of doing my dissertation and that related research. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it with your question, I believe.
I feel like I tried to become a professor and I sort of became not a professor. So I'm sort of in a slightly weird position here. Like, I was not very organized about planning to my career. And so I don't really recommend like chaotically just kind of doing whatever seems like the best idea at the time. But that's kind of what I did. And a lot of like, it turns out, so I was a professor for about 5 years. And I didn't like it very much. And I like being in industry much better. And so I think one thing that I found is it's just very hard to tell what you're going to like, or at least for me, until you try it. And so I would sort of recommend like at least sort of finding ways to kind of dip your toe into things that you're thinking of committing to, and then just seeing whether they suit you and not. The other thing is, I think I tied up a lot of my personal self-esteem with the idea of becoming a professor, and that was a very bad idea, it turns out, because there are many more things in this world you can do than being a professor and be successful, although being a professor is a fine thing as well if it suits you.
But I'm not yet a professor, so I cannot give advice.
How do you decide when to pull the plug on some project, whether something's not working out or the scope turns out to be so big, both as an advisor or a senior researcher and like as a student?
I think this is probably more for you folks.
I'll let you start, Ron. I think you have a bit more experience. So hopefully that can contribute to this.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you all have stuff, but so, well, especially when you're a graduate student or working with a professor, you often have to lean on them to give you guidance, and sometimes there's not always a definitive like, oh, the professor has the vision. We often have no idea what we're doing either, especially when because you're at the edge, right? You're kind of working just at the edge of people's knowledge sometimes, and often I had like one of my good friends from graduate school, Jeremy Seek, who does a lot of work in similar areas to me. He always said like he always tried to fail as quickly as humanly possible. Like he's like just like go for the jugular and then like kill the project quickly because then you can move on to another one. And you can get vested in something that's it's like, well, I've been kind of vested in this one and it's really hard to let it go. But at least trying to find like, what's the thing that's going to really challenge what I'm doing the most will be helpful. But that's also sort of coming from the point of view of a professor. Like usually when you're working with a professor, it's like, and this is the scary thing from the professor's point of view, it's like, oh my God, I'm giving one of my students this thing, am I sending them down to their doom? So we have this like, this stress about trying to figure out what direction to go in and the hope that, but what's nice is it's not always the case that you go do something and then the thing either gets done or not. It's more, and my advisor was always like this, what you do is you do the work, or you do work, and then at some point something hits you. And sometimes you'll veer heavily from what you're originally doing. So there's like multiple strategies in there, like, but keeping your eyes open while also being simultaneously critical of your own work while, like, for some people it's easy to be critical and it's hard to be supportive of your own work. So you have to kind of find this balance. Death. Oh, yeah, there, we're back. Yeah, so can you simultaneously balance both of those things? But I'd say at this point in the career, it's often up to the supervisor to sort of help with that. But you can often help the supervisor by showing them the what you know about the space, and here's the things I'm worried about, and then here's the things that I think are good. And so sometimes when I'm journaling for research, I spend time and I specifically say, I feel bothered and I don't know exactly why, and here's the things that are bothering me, and just kind of writing it out in words helps me kind of work through things sometimes.
So I guess in terms of in starting out as an undergrad going to a PhD, or you're already in a PhD program, your advisors should be helping you through the process of something failing. They should know what to do next or how to guide you next if you're getting like results that are negative. And sometimes actually negative results are interesting, and there are actually venues where you can submit your negative results and they're receptive of that. So I guess my take on it is there's no failure of a project. I think it's just a reframing of that project in some other way that's interesting. Through failure, you can learn a lot of things. So one example is we actually have a paper here at TPSA, a workshop on incorrectness logic. We were trying to connect gradual verification and incorrectness logic. And at first, we were going down this route, and it turned out completely wrong. We overmissed a very simple thing that Hoare logic. There's really this and I'm not going to go into the details. I'm not going to bore you with the details. Anyway, we literally spent so long doing some proofs and some formalisms that we overlooked this very simple thing, and we're like, oh, this is all garbage. We have to throw it all away. But through that process and through talking about that failure, we were actually able to guide the project in a direction that got us some even more interesting results. And we have a paper here at a workshop. So I can't really think of a time in research where I mean, as a PhD student, I felt like I failed a lot all the time. But in terms of the overall arcing story of my work and the work that I've produced in my PhD and even now and with my students, all those little failures have turned into something productive eventually. And I think, Jared, or was it, you kind of ended with it. I think that you can just reframe things or use that to guide new projects and turn it into a success. I don't think there really is any true failures of a project.
I actually do have an opinion after all. How wonderful. I think that the other way to think about this is that you should talk to your advisor about hey, I think my project is going wrong. How does this turn into a paper? I need papers. And academia and research is both a wonderful and idealistic place, and also a iterated status game we are all playing. And you should think of it explicitly that way. You have a certain number of coupons you can push forward when you want to get a faculty position, and you should have the right number of coupons. And those, I think that you can both be idealistic and also somewhat cynical about the status game we are all playing. So I think if you are concerned, your advisor should help you with that. And if you're saying we've been at this 6 months, nothing seems to be going anywhere, your advisor, has somewhat different incentives than you, and you should be very clear about the fact that you want to kind of get to something which can help you in your future career, and maintain the shining light of academia and the ivory tower or whatever. All that kind of stuff is good as well. But ultimately, it's your career, all of your careers that you want trying to pursue here, and you should think of it as kind of a thing that you're taking care of your own interests.
So a lot of my colleagues are software engineers or software engineering interns, and I love reading about and talking about fancy type systems and formal verification and secure compilation and all that stuff, but they don't really know anything about that, and they don't care. So I was wondering, how much value do you think there is in either working as a software developer or knowing software developers and interacting with them regularly for research that might eventually make a practical difference for everybody? Because, for example, at Coinbase, they have this super ancient Ruby on Rails app that basically runs half of everything they have, and it breaks once a week, right? So they don't really understand all the super awesome stuff that everyone here does. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that having input from the industry is very, very valuable because industry has problems, a lot of them, and we are here to help them. So I think that, yeah, industry is a wonderful place to just pick problems to solve and get ideas. So any experience or friends in the industry is good to have, I think, yeah.
I think it's really valuable to kind of have like customers in mind. I think it's good to kind of think like, even if you're writing a paper, I think that, I don't know if you all know this, the Heilmeier catechisms, it's a thing that DARPA uses to try to assess things. Very good questions, but like the most profound question on that list is who cares, right? And I think an amazing number of PL papers, to me, the answer is no one. It's no one cares, right? Except, you all care, like you're wonderful, but like no one outside this room. And so I think that it's very valuable to kind of gut check. One of the real privileges of working at Galois is I have clients and I say to them, hey, what do you think we did this? And they say, we don't care about that. And like the first few times I was like, ow, that really hurts. And then after that, I realized that really sharpens your intuitions about, am I doing stuff that actually matters? And I think academics are often surprisingly poorly aligned to kind of what people care about. So I think it's good, there's all sorts of other reasons why people don't use fancy types or whatever. But like answering that core, like who cares question, I think is really good. And it should be someone other than just the program committee of POPL, I think, in my personal opinion. So I think it's great to kind of get that feedback and sort of, or ask another question, like what would make you care about this? If we could do this, would that be a thing you care about? That's another great question to ask. So yeah, I totally recommend talking to people.
Yeah, I actually, as a new junior faculty, trying to write grants and come up with new ideas, and I specifically, like, my whole research on graduate verification is I want to make formal methods and verification more usable. And that applies also to, like, type systems. We want to make type systems usable. Like, we want to talk to our end users, right? And as a junior faculty who's been, like, just in a PhD and kind of focused on the technical stuff and making the real, like, learning separation logic and Hoare logic and doing theory and having POPL papers, like, I feel like I have not really got to talk to people who actually get to use my tool, and like I really do want the impact. I want people to be able to use my verification tool. I mean, and that's also what I tell the grant people, is that I eventually want my tool to be used broadly by people in that write software on a regular basis. But I don't actually have a ton of those connections because I've been in academia land and PL land forever. So actually, right now, I'm a little jealous of you for having all of those software engineering friends where I could go talk to and be like, hey, what tools do you use on a daily basis? What are the problems that you have with those tools? And how can I solve them? Or how can I make the code that you write more secure or help them not break, provably so? And I will figure out those details, but I need to know what kind of problems to tailor my solutions to.
Yeah, I haven't spent time with developers. I've been in academia forever, basically. I guess the one thing I'll say that just generally might be useful is that it's easy for, even within the discipline of computer science, first we break into silos. And within the silos, we have different values, different concerns, and different priorities and even terminology that we use. And so while I think there's many different reasons for doing research, sometimes what you're trying to do is think broadly about 20 years out or something. Like one of my professors, Amr Sabri, has been thinking about quantum computers for the last 20 years, and there were no quantum computers 20 years ago. But he's like, but if we had one, how would we program it? And people are like, what do you, like, they pay you to do this, right? So, but it ends up being a problem. It ends up being of particular interest later, and things aren't always like that. But there's also the case that being able to empathize with another sub-community and see through their eyes what they care about has led to lots of really interesting research. I mean, I think of the first person that comes to mind for me is Nate Foster, who embedded himself in the networks community after doing a dissertation about lenses, and then came to understand what their values were, and then said, how could I use the toolbox that I have to solve problems in that space? And he's not going straight to like, obviously you need dependent types network people, it's more like, you have small problems that you can see through a different lens. And I think in general, there's some value to that, but I don't know that everybody needs to do it, but I think that some people should do it.
This is actually sort of related to George's question about kind of, yeah. So from like, just for me personally, I think like a lot of my motivation to do research and to do like a PhD is because of, you know, like I used to work in industry, and like, you know, there are like lots of problems with how things are done. But I also do, I mean, this is like kind of far out maybe, but you know, I envision that as I get further away from that life, a lot of those inspirations and ideas will kind of reach an end, I guess. And I'm wondering kind of, you know, in like the faculty career, I guess, like is there like space to kind of like do what you said, like embed yourself into another area, or even go back to work in industry for a few years and then come back? Or is that kind of just not really that possible, I guess? Like, do you have to like keep on publishing, or is there like, I guess, grace in the academic world? Yeah.
So I think in general, and I'll probably pass it down briefly, but there are for sure. So for just a few examples, I've known a few faculty members who will, when they go on sabbatical, in many places every roughly 6 years or so, you get to take a year and go kind of decompress and also kind of find inspiration. And some people will go to a company. Like I know a few people have gone to Galois, for instance, and spent time there, and it really gives you a chance to look at things from, I mean, it's a research institution. It's not, you're not necessarily going like, oh, I'm just going to go to work in the back room of the grocery store that needs like database stuff. But who knows, right? People do different things. So there are opportunities there. And then there's also sometimes students will go do internships, and that can often lead to connections where the students come back and they become, in many ways, the students are like your scouts, and they kind of can tell you what's happening as well. And there's different ways that you can stay connected to things that you care about. And then other people decide that they want to leave and go to industry. So it's not a one-way street is basically what I'd say.
Yeah, I think Ron said most of what I want to say. Definitely students, and then after, a lot of places, some have pre-tenure sabbatical, some have, like Purdue has, it's after you get tenure, you take a year, and then a lot of people go to industry for that time period so that they can like do the things that you're saying, is get familiar with the type of problems they have and how their research, or how, the nice thing after tenure is you can kind of switch gears and really change the kind of research you're doing. So yeah, those are kind of the big ones. Shoot, I had one other one to add that I thought was pretty good, but funding. So as a faculty, you need funding. A good place to get funding is through a lot of industry awards. And those industry awards leads to connections with people in industry. And then those connections lead to collaborations, and those collaborations lead to you getting more involved in kind of what's happening in that. Say, like Amazon. There's an Amazon Research Award. So if you get an Amazon Research Award, you get a contact at Amazon. If you get a Google one, you get a contact at Google. And they try to tailor it, I think, to like what your research is interested in and the connection you can make there. And then you kind of go from there and produce these kind of industry connections. One thing that's cool about Purdue, some other institutions I don't know have this, but Purdue, and maybe it's because I'm in ECE, so I'm in engineering. Yeah, I'm a PL person in computer engineering, but that's fun. Anyway, so getting closer to the architecture people. They have this like industry, like research to industry kind of pipeline and resources on campus that I can, as a faculty, connect into. So I can make these connections with industry, even industries in Indiana nearby Purdue. And so I've made, actually, even through my like new faculty orientation, I made some cool connections with some cool companies that are actually interested in formal methods. And so I actually might use them as like some professionals so I'm going to do user studies. I like to do user studies with my tools. So, and I really want to teach Rust through verification topics. And so they want to learn Rust, actually, which is kind of cool. And so I think that we're going to have some conversations where I can kind of use them as users for my user studies. So there's a lot of random opportunities that pop up that faculty connect with people in industry.
Yeah, it's pretty normal for us. So we often run big collaborations, like me and Leo were just at an offsite today where we're building a C-verification tool, and it's a C-verification tool with 2 big US government contractors as customers. And so we spent a lot of today talking and or arguing with them about what their use cases should be. And that's great because they do that thing where they're like, you're wrong and you should do this instead. And and the US I think is different from like a lot of other places in the world, in that there are a lot of these big collaborative. In fact, the EU has them as well, I think, as well. So there's a lot of kind of permeability between industry and academia. Even if you don't stop being a professor, you can kind of like work in big groups collaborating with kind of other industry places. So I think there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, a good example for like my field is that often industry want fast programs, and we have to prove them correct. So it works like a very good sort of good problems to work on.
Awesome. And on that note, we're out of time. So let's thank our panelists.